Hi all, Mr. Davidson here, Head of Science. I'm just going to chat to you and talk you through how science looks at GCSE. You'll be doing this in class as well with your teacher, and you'll be sort of rehashing some of the similar ground, but it's just important to have it recorded in one place just in case you've got any questions or you want to look back over it again. Okay. So firstly, one of the big differences when you move into GCSE is you will acquire 2 extra teachers. Okay, you are taught biology, chemistry and physics in separate lessons. So you've got 2 lessons of chemistry, 2 lessons of physics and 2 lessons of biology every week. Normally your teacher will stay with you that you had for year 7 and year 8, and you'll just acquire 2 more for the other sciences. In terms of what you'll cover in that, it's much the same. So most of our topics that you covered in year 7 and 8, things like forces of motion, atoms, the periodic table, cells and the body, they mirror what happens at the GCSE. It's just that you don't do it in as much detail, so you're going to add more stuff and you're going to add a layer of difficulty to some of it. Okay, so for example, thinking about forces in motion, what we've covered at Key Stage 3, you might know how things could move and why they move, but you're going to look at velocity time and distance time graphs in more detail to analyze that movement. Okay, so that is an example. In terms of the way what you're going to be assessed on, it's essentially all knowledge. We're a little bit like other subjects that are knowledge-based, potentially geography, a bit of history, French, I suppose. The languages, you need to know all of the key facts. And 40% of your exam is actually sort of recalling that information, the information that you're asked to learn, and describing it. Another 40% of your exam is taking that information and applying it in situations that you might not have come across before. Okay, and that's obviously a little bit more difficult, but you need to know the information in the first place to allow you to access it. So that's why your teachers have spent a lot of time going through key concepts like cells, like the names of the forces, the energy types, the parts of atoms, things like that. Because if you don't have that knowledge, you can't then apply it, so you miss out on a huge chunk of your potential GCSE grade. Finally, other skills they're looking at is they're looking at your ability to sort of evaluate and interpret things that you're given. So they might give you a graph and ask you to say what's happening in the graph and draw some conclusions on it. And it's not necessarily going to rely on the knowledge that you have, more the skill of actually being able to look at something new and decide something. Maths wise, there's quite a big maths component in science, but it's not equally weighted. So in biology, 10% of your biology exam will be maths. A lot of that will come up with things like microscopy when you're converting between units and sizes. Chemistry, you're going to do some calculations on how heavy atoms and molecules are, and various other things like that. And in physics, you've already done some of this, things like calculating speeds, calculating efficiency, stuff like that. And you're going to do way more of that, okay? And overall, 20% of your exam is maths based, okay? But we'll take you through that step by step as we go. It'll also get a bit easier because some of the skills that we will do in science, you'll be doing in maths, and that makes everything sort of joined together. It's lovely. Okay? Now, in terms of options, you don't really have an option for science. So it's a core subject, everyone's got to do it. But we do have 2 different courses. And those 2 courses are combined science and separate science. Now, in combined science, you will sit your 6 papers. So everybody who does science, no matter what you're going to do, has to sit 6 different papers. 2 for chemistry, 2 for biology, and 2 for physics. And then all the marks for those 6 papers are added up, and a grade is given to you for worth 2 GCSEs on that score. Okay, so it's all added up together, and that's why we call it combined science. All the sciences are combined. In separate science, you will study the sciences separately, kind of given in the name. But you get a biology grade, so a biology GCSE, a chemistry GCSE, and a physics GCSE. So that leads to one extra GCSE, but the papers are longer. So rather than 60 minutes each, an hour and 10 minutes each, they're an hour and 45 minutes, and there's an extra 40 marks per paper. So they're much more lengthy in size, okay? And there's a lot more content. And what that means for you is if you were to do separate science, you would have to study extra stuff, okay? And it's actually theoretically about a year's worth of extra stuff. How this works in practice is that everybody does the extra stuff in year 9, okay? So we all do a little bit extra. In year 10, it's just the top couple of classes that will do that extra stuff. And then in year 11, there'll be time, this is how it works at the moment, there'll be time after school and one lesson in school to do that extra stuff, okay? So separate science is a big commitment, and we only recommend it for students that really want to go on and do A-level sciences, and that tends to be quite a few students every year. But again, for options, there isn't one. Okay, you're all going to carry on in year 9 exactly the way you were in year 8, okay, and you won't notice a difference. Everyone will be doing the same thing. In terms of choosing, what happens is in year 10, at the very end of year 10, you'll have a mock, and you'll have mocks for every subject in the whole school, and we'll look at the grade you got in that. We'll talk to you, we'll talk to your parents, and then we'll all decide together whether triple science is the right thing for you, separate science, and those 3 different GCSEs and those longer papers, or whether you're better off doing combined science. Okay, so you don't need to really think about it at all. If you already know that it's something you definitely want to do, not surprisingly, you just need to try as hard as you can. Okay, but that really should go for everybody. Okay. Even if you don't want to do triple science and you don't want to, or separate science, and you don't want to go on and do A-levels, you still want to try as hard as you possibly can to get the highest grade you can. And even if you don't want to do separate science, but you do want to do A-levels in sciences, you can still do that using combined science. Neither of these routes sort of rules you out of doing things further on later on in life. Okay? Another key aspect of the GCSE is core practicals. Now, you've done some of these already. Obviously, this year we've done a little bit less than we might normally do. But our core practicals are an examined element as well. Okay, so they're part of sort of our knowledge that we need. Now, you're not assessed on these practicals in school, so no one's going to be standing there with a clipboard sort of judging you. However, you will be assessed in the exam on the knowledge that you gain when you're doing it. So for example, if you're looking at onion cells through a microscope, which is something every single one of you has done, you might be asked what the steps are to be able to do that and to be able to measure some of the cells. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that you would do in a core practical, and that's how you'd be assessed. Now, in terms of topics, fairly self-explanatory. Okay, that's on the screen. You can pause it if you'd like to. But we've got a list of topics for biology, chemistry, and physics for combined science. For separate sciences, okay, remember this is the extra stuff. In physics, you add a couple of topics. You add astronomy and you add static electricity. In chemistry, you add a couple of topics as well. Separate chemistry 1 and separate chemistry 2 are their inventive names. And in biology, the extra stuff is woven into all of the topics that already exist. So if you have a quick look, you can see that in paper 2, you do plant structures and their functions, and it's just that there's some extra stuff when you do the plant structures that you would need to know for separate science, but not for combined science, okay? And that will just be taught to you as part of your normal lessons in year 9, and then it'll be extra sort of in year 10 for sets 1 and 2, and then year 11 it'll be extra for those who are doing it after school, okay, or in that one lesson a week I mentioned. So in terms of science and why it's important, there's so much you can do with science. You can go on to be a scientist if you would like to. You can go on to do any of the technical jobs that involve science. We're lucky enough that we've got some amazing universities in the Northeast that are superb for science and studying science. But it's more than just that. Science is seen as a facilitating subject, it's called, which basically means that having science as an A-level, and therefore having to do well at it at GCSE, will get you into a university or get you into a job, irrelevant of whether that needs science or not, okay? We're not the only facilitating subject. Maths, English, languages, they're all facilitating subjects as well. But it's just that the sciences and maths, English and languages are seen as being particularly useful for giving you a skill set that you can use in work. Okay, so even if you don't want to be a scientist, even if you know for a fact that engineering is not for you or any of the things that would require you to study science at A-level, it's still really good to have in your back pocket to have a job. Again, if you're sat down for a job interview in the future and somebody sat there and they've got a good science GCSE and the other person haven't, but you're otherwise identical, the person with the science GCSE is probably going to win out because they've got that skill set. There's a million different careers that are accessible through sciences. There's a few on the screen now. What I'd recommend is, if you already have an idea of what you want to do in life, is look up what sciences or what subjects are needed to access that. If you're not sure and you want to have a look at some different careers, there are some great websites to allow you to do that. Mr. McMahon will happily share loads of information with you about where you can go to find out about different careers in the future and what options are needed. Definitely worth exploring early. There's quite frequently I have conversations with year 11s that tell me that they're applying to do certain things at college because they want to do certain things in later life, and it comes as a shock to them that science is one of the things that they're told that they need to pass. So it's definitely worth knowing early on whether you're gonna need those skills or not. Okay, especially because, remember, if you want to do those A-level sciences, you really need to be pursuing the separate science route, and that means giving it your absolute all from year 9 all the way through to year 11. You can't afford to sort of sit back and relax in year 9 and hope that somehow you're going to make up for it. Right, I think I've covered pretty much everything. Again, you'll go through this in lessons as well. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to email me. Or ask your teachers in lesson, but otherwise I'll leave it at that. And like I said, it's not fundamentally, there is no choice, you have to do science, and the difference comes which science course do you do, and that's really depending on where you want to end up in the future, and whether you're willing to put the work in or not. Okay, you're all capable of doing it, it's just a matter of whether you would like to or not.